What is happening? J Gamer Dude here, and are you a fan of the Resident Evil series? An interesting question to ask because of some leaks going around that, or I suppose news from a leaker suggesting that Resident Evil 9 might possibly go to an open world state. And this article that I've got here actually kind of delves a little bit deeper into the way Capcom greenlights their games, their projects, and it is actually quite interesting to, sit down, look at, read, take into account some of the things they've done in the past and what this kind of looks like right now. So, for example, well, if we just look down a bit, the first example was actually really good, but so what Dusk Golem says here is that a little bit of a tidbit that he'll share. Capcom will often greenlight new games or initiatives in threes close together. So the example was RE7, RE2, and DMC5 were all greenlit fairly close to each other to take advantage of the new RE engine. And sure enough, that's the case. However, in this case, looking at Dragon's Dogma 2, Monster Hunter Wilds, and Resident Evil 9, while working on Monster Hunter Wilds, trying to make it more of an open world game, it seems that obviously we know Dragon's Dogma 2 is an open world game. Like, you have a world that you can travel across the map on. Granted, there's limited movement in terms of fast travel and things like that, but there is a sprawling map and you can go from one area to another to another to another. Monster Hunter Wilds, that does seem like something that might actually work, but yeah, so that does seem like something that would work as like the next evolution of the Monster Hunter franchise, because it's always been sort of zone, location, or area based for the most part. So for it to be a fully sprawling world does seem like a very neat or a very cool idea. I mean, let me know what you guys think, because that does seem like something that should have already kind of been in the works. But if they haven't already, and if Dragon's Dogma 2 is anything to go by, I hope that the movement isn't inherently super sluggish, or that, fast traveling is something that is limited in some capacity by using, say, for example, an item that you could probably lose or be potentially used up. So it's not an infinite use item, it's probably not worth doing, but that's not what Monster Hunter was known for. However, in the case of Resident Evil, it's always been small, claustrophobic environments like hospitals, sometimes streets on a vehicle, if you're looking at Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 4 with like the swampish areas, Resident Evil 0 when you're like in the facility and then you kind of go underground into the underground facility, and then of course there's the manor in Resident Evil 1. Like, generally Resident Evil 7, a more recent example, you've got the Baker House. Like, there is a lot of interesting, it's like, it's all small claustrophobic environments, but even then, for something like this to go into a more sprawling open area, you're then kind of looking at like the farmish areas of the Evil Within, for example, which is kind of like closest to the beginning of the game. And that didn't really do Evil Within much in the way of justice. I'm glad that this preview is up here at the moment, because I completely forgot about the fact that that was a location which is in a horror game that was very much designed around Resident Evil 4 and stuff like that. So it's kind of just interesting to sit down, look at this preview and be like, oh, that's the thing that they did. And how could that be implemented in Resident Evil 9? Probably poorly, because the thing is that if Resident Evil 9 did have a open sprawling world, it doesn't feel like it's a game that should have in any way fast travel, because it then defeats the psychological horror nature of the title. Whereas with horror games, it's better to set it in small corridors and things like that. And if you do need to return to a location, Resident Evil already has that covered with 0, with Resident Evil 1, with Resident Evil 7. You can return to previous locations and then sort out your equipment and items and whatever have you, and then go back out venturing again into a different corridor because now you have an item that'll allow you to pass, or an event happened, like say for example you turned on a generator and now that feeds power to a room from the main hall that you always keep visiting to. It almost becomes like a second home to you in a way. But yeah, so seeing Resident Evil 9 possibly be a sort of open world, it does make me question why you'd want to do that. Because an open world, or a sandbox even, depending on what words you want to use to describe it, is ideally being able to faff around in any location. But the thing is that I would not say that the mansion from 1 or the facility in 0 would count as open worlds. Yes, you can go into any location within the area that you're in. However, you have to do it in a very specific or particular order because you need to get items, equipment, or you need to go through some story beats in order to open or unlock certain other locations, and the games were inherently obtuse in equal capacity as well. So it does kind of make me wonder, like, where are we kind of going to be going with this? How does an open world horror game look like? And sure, you could look at say something like Dying Light or Dead Island, but if you look at both those games, they're both more action oriented than Resident Evil, and on top of that, neither of those games are scary either. And that's kind of what Resident Evil should have. That's what 7 did so well when I was playing it in VR. It was bloody frightening. And even though the director says, oh, Resident Evil 7 was just too scary, that's fine. Like, please make it as scary as humanly possible. That's kind of a good thing. But the design kind of conflicts with the idea of what an open world is. So I'll be curious to know in the comments below, what do you guys think about a horror game going open world, but also being equal parts scary as well. Again, the examples I've given are just, Dead Island, Dying Light. Neither of those are particularly scary or anything else in between. And I'm sure they're going to keep the first person aspect going. But with all of that being said, please comment below on anything that I kind of mentioned in this video. Please like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 200 subs by the end of the year, and I do want my videos to go out to more people. With all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.